Stay on target! Stay on target! It's crashing time!
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of So There I Was. It's how every great aviation tale begins. Unfortunately, Fig isn't here to record the intro with me today. He's flying. But this is the continuation of our interview with Chaz. Episode 7 is entitled Four-Wheeling and Fires and Snakes. Oh my. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. And we will see you again next week with episode 8. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can write to Fig at sothereiwas.us or to me at Repete at sothereiwas.us. Repeat spelled REPETE. You can follow us on Facebook at sothereiwas.us/Facebook or on Twitter at sothereiwas.us/Twitter. We love hearing from you. We love the comments. We love the emails. Keep them coming, please. Sit back and enjoy the show. Here it is, episode 7. Four-wheeling and fires and snakes. Oh my.
Other Kingsville things, thinking about, so there I was. One I have to tell just because one of my dearest friends was involved. He also went to later and we all worked together there. We were in a 4-plane formation. We had 3 solos. I was -3, he was -4. The instructor in the lead aircraft had a student, flying. We're in right echelon, tight formation. And my buddy -4 apparently was not paying attention to my wingtip and my canopy bow to hold his position because he looked forward just enough to see a Cessna at 12 o'clock about to impact our formation, which the lead must have missed. And he called it in a fairly high-pitched tone.
Like a 6-year-old girl, huh?
Yeah, enough to scare the you-know-what out of you. Anyway, the formation exploded. I don't know. I think he pitched straight up. I rolled away from -2 and rolled inverted and pulled down. I think we were at about 15,000. I don't know where -2 went. It took us several minutes to rejoin. I bottomed out somewhere low. And
it was the hard deck at 10,000, I'm sure.
Yeah, I remember the hard deck was involved a couple of times, going down and coming up. And but anyway, we rejoined and went on. But anyway, that's one memory from that world. Another one I remember that happened when I'm there, not to me, but it's another, these are all lessons. This is another lesson learned moment. This was not my doing, but it was another guy, unfortunate. They did air-to-air gunnery in the T2. You guys will recall that.
Yeah.
And they tow a banner and they had, 50 caliber pods they'd put on the airplane, and it had a sight system on it. And part of the setup was you go out to the arming area and you'd have to adjust the gun sight. As I remember, I think you took the 300 mil ring and you had to roll it down to where it just touched the seam between the nose cone and the main body, something like that. There was a procedure. Anyway, this particular individual was not very tall. And so for him to get up high enough in his seat to adjust the ring down, he had to loosen up his lap straps and then kind of raise up the seat and adjust it, which, was understandable. Apparently on this particular day, he forgot to retighten the lap straps.
Oh boy.
And they went out in the gunnery pattern and he managed to depart the airplane from the perch and went into a spin, hit the hard floor, as we know, and had to eject. And he had to eject with straps not tight. And he survived severe injuries. And his flying was done. And that also sobered me up. I mean, it was like, you got to pay attention to little details.
I can only imagine. Let me interrupt briefly with that. That reminds me, all these things trigger things, right? I was coming out of Cherry Point one day with a student in the back seat of the A4. We were going down to Key West to pick up the boat to do carrier quals. And I can't remember what kind of flight it was, but I was in the back seat of the A4, so I'm thinking it was an instrument hop of some sort. But we were suddenly in a hurry to get out of Cherry Point, so I find myself rushing and getting in the airplane and get down there. And then we were down near Key West, and the instructor wants to go out and look at the Tortugas. So we go out and look at the dry Tortugas and do a nice little tour. And we're coming into Key West, and I dropped my knee board for whatever reason. I had pulled it off to adjust it, and I dropped it. And I reached up to release one of my Coke fittings so that I could reach down and get it. Your Coke fittings are kind of like your shoulder straps. And I went up to undo those so I could reach down and get my knee board, and they were not attached
at all.
I had flown an entire hop in an ejection seat aircraft, not attached to the risers to my chute. In the event we had to eject, I would have been a rock. So yeah, attention to detail put the fear of God into me. I never did that again. Lesson learned. But thank God that single engine jet didn't have any malfunctions that day. But
wow.
Well, I mean, let's keep in mind you were in the Corps, though. I think even if you'd ejected without the straps, you'd have landed okay. You'd have just bounced.
Well, yeah, right.
You know.
Well, today I was, you know.
I know. I know what the men's branch of the Navy is, so you know I get it.
There you go.
Thank you for that, Chuck.
Part of the Department of the Navy, yeah. The men's department.
Yeah. I know it all. So, so the story continues. We're in Kingsville. These things are happening. Then let me tell one funny story, and then I will tell where life as I know it for the rest of my life begins. And the funny one is I had a Land Cruiser I bought in Pensacola, and it was the coolest car I'd ever owned in my life. One of those old, little boxy cruisers. And it was an amazing four-wheel drive vehicle, I mean, just remarkable. I get down to Kingsville, and one of my best friends down there has one too. So we have the two Land Cruisers on base. So we go four-wheeling together all the time. And our other friends, pile in with us, and we go explore the areas around Kingsville, down south mostly, go into the sand dunes and down on Padre Island. And we just had a lot of fun. Well, one day we're down at, I'm trying to remember the name of the place, Port Arthur. We went down to Port Arthur. There's sand dunes down there and a lot of open country. And we're four-wheeling, and there's a little county strip at Port Arthur, a little north-south county strip. I don't know, 4,000 foot long, strip. And we're about, 75 yards abeam the runway, driving through these sand dunes, and I get stuck. My wheel starts spinning. Well, my buddy's behind me in his cruiser. He sees what's happening, and I spin my wheel, and it ignites the brush. Next thing I know, I got flames coming up in front of me, and he sees it. He runs out, grabs his winch, hooks on to the back of my cruiser to pull me out of the fire. My wife's in the right seat. I'm like, you got to get out, go. He's emptying people out of his. He tries to pull me out, and he gets stuck. By this point, the flames are coming through the open doors on the passenger side, and the fuel tank in that vehicle was under the passenger seat. I can hear the fuel start to hiss from the flames hit the tank, and I think probably ought to get out of here. So I jump out, he jumps out, our vehicles are left. We start running through the brush. You know what else doesn't like flames? Rattlesnakes. There were rattlesnakes everywhere. And the wives were out, and the other passengers were out, and they'd already discovered the snakes. And we're trying to not step on rattlesnakes and get away from the fire. And we finally make it back to the runway. And we're watching now as our Land Cruisers are consumed in the flames.
Oh no.
So this is not good. And next thing I look down the runway, and here comes a 1940s version ladder fire truck onto the runway, and he comes hauling down the runway. So you're going to come fight the fire. And I know I'm sitting here going, oh, we're in trouble. We are in so much trouble. This is not going to be good. Oh, these people are going to be so angry. This fire's burning now and going like crazy. It was windy. This truck comes up, and it's bouncing as it gets to me. The guy had set the emergency brake and locked the wheels, and it just goes bouncing past us. And he's yelling out the window, "No brakes, no brakes, no brakes," as he goes down and goes off the end of the runway. And he finally turns around and comes back, pulls up. A couple of his buddies pile off the ladder. There's a bunch of his buddies and their wives and girlfriends on the ladder. They grab the fire hose and take off running toward the flames. The guy watching it unspooled doesn't bother to tell them when they're running out of hose. They hit the end, the sine wave goes down the hose, and these two guys get flipped into the fire. They get out pretty quick. Anyway, the fire burns away because the wind blows it away. Our vehicles are left out there smoldering. And now that the sheriff's there, the whole town's there. And when I just know, God, we're in so much trouble. This is not going to be good. And finally, the sheriff comes over and he goes, "Which you guys own these vehicles?" And I go, "Me, sir." And my buddy goes, "Me." And he goes, "Well," he goes, "made quite a mess out here." And I go, "Yes, sir. Sure. Sorry about that." He goes, no, don't be sorry." And I go, "What, sir?" And he goes, "Folks over here have decided they're going to throw a potluck in your honor tonight." And I'm like, "A potluck?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "That place is full of snakes. They've been wanting to burn it for years, but no one will let them do it." And he go, so the sheriff, turned out he was a former Coast Guard officer, and he was the sheriff down there. And we ended up having to leave my vehicle. The other one was drivable. Mine, it got so hot it melted the belts, the hoses, a lot of damage, the tires. So the aviation part of this story is then for the next couple of months, I flew the Flying Club 172 down there every weekend and took parts and went down and slowly rebuilt my Land Cruiser. Stayed with the sheriff. We did that night of the fire. Stayed with him every time I went down there. He was one of the nicest characters. He'd take us on patrol with him in a patrol car. Then we'd get him in the 172 and go flying up and down the coast toward Matamoros. And he'd show us where all the drug smuggling operations on the coast were in every little bay and harbor down there. It was great. He'd go, "Don't fly too low here, man.
They'll shoot you."
I'm like, "Okay." Yeah. So that was Kingsville, and then like I said, life is about to turn a corner, and it's a corner that runs to this day. I had in the T2 world, I had some bouts with air sickness, and then got over it. Managed to fly my flights and all that, put it behind me. Got to the A4, and as you guys may recall, the beginning of the A4 syllabus, you flew the first several hops under the bag.
Oh yeah.
And we go out and do aerobatics and everything under the hood.
I was telling my daughter about that yesterday. Going, yeah, we did aerobatics under the hood. The instructor was out VMC, in case things went really badly. But yeah, it was a huge confidence builder.
Yeah, but unfortunately for a guy that had a little bit of sensitivity to motion, it wasn't that wonderful.
Yeah,
and I needed really visual to kind of keep my thing together. And so I ended up. I caught a break again. What was it Fogelberg said? Chance of a lifetime and a lifetime of chance. I had to go see the flight surgeon because of this, and the flight surgeon was concerned about my future because of this issue. And I was too, I thought I'm probably going to get a bullet here. It's probably going to be over. It turned out that his corpsman had just transferred in. It was his first week on the job. And it turned out his corpsman had come from the Naval Aeromedical Research Laboratory in Pensacola, which was an affiliate of NASA. And the corpsman had been working on a research project for NASA about motion. And the corpsman went and tracked the flight surgeon down and apparently told the flight surgeon he thought I'd make a great subject for their research because they're looking for people that had more sensitivity, vestibular sensitivity. And so he convinced them. And they sent me to NASA and NAMRL to take part in this research. I will tell you this because pilots will love this. Other people, maybe not so much. But I get down there. They have developed all manner of machine to induce severe motion. 1, 2, 3 axis centrifuge type machines, crazy stuff. They would attach brainwave monitors, rapid eye movement monitors to you, monitors to your hands to detect perspiration, tracking your heart. They track everything. But the fun part was when I get down there, they had to baseline you in every device. Well, baselining you in each of those devices mean they had to run you in that device till you hurled. And so I had to ride every one of those machines until I got, knee walking.
Lousy, rotten karmic retribution.
Amen.
Chaz, you're not painting a very pretty picture here.
Oh, it gets better. It gets a lot better. Well, once they did the baseline, once they knew how your body physiologically reacted to the whole thing from start to finish, every step of the way toward the grisly end there, they had it all. They had it all in memory of the computers. They had it all. And so then what they did was those of us that were included in this program were broken into different groups and given different ways to deal with it. And some of them were given certain drug things to neutralize the effect. Others, I was put in a group with a couple of neuroscientists to see if I could develop alpha wave training skills to the point that I could put my brain into alpha state while I was flying, while I was actively doing something. And that may be foreign language to most people, alpha wave, but you've got different brain waves, and alpha wave is a slow wave in the brain, and alpha wave calms anxiety. It calms you. So alpha wave is a very good state. I think today it's evolved in what people would probably call meditation mindfulness type thing. So that's kind of where that started. And then they went on to develop it and compress the time. They wanted to get me to a place where I could actually achieve an alpha state in a matter of a few seconds, not minutes. And that's what I worked on. And I was in every day, and then I go get the machines every few days. And I did. They taught me how to do it. It was pretty amazing. And the technique, my mental hook, because it had to be something you could do in the cockpit. When you felt this charge come on, you had to be able to grab it. But the hook was take one slow, deep breath and wiggle your toes. And those two little things connect together would help me get my brain to go to the alpha thing they'd trained me to do. Well, anyway, I went through that. I will tell you the most horrible thing. I always hear stories of torture, waterboarding, and things of that nature. They had a little gizmo down there that I think would be much more effective and a lot neater. They put you in a room on a gurney, strap you down. They then insert microtubules into your ears. Now, the reason NASA was doing this research, by the way, was most of the astronauts had problems with this because in weightlessness, the fluid in your inner ear has no reference. It just goes wherever it wants to go. So you got one ear doing one thing, the other ear doing something different, your eyes telling you something, and you got no real feel in your butt. You're not, pulling G's or anything. And that's all the things that kind of connect together to give you your sense of motion. So the astronauts had struggles with this. So that's why NASA was trying to find answers. But this device, the one I loved, they put microtubules in your ear. You're strapped to the table. They hook all the monitors on you. Then there were 3 lights up on the edge of the ceiling, and they had you look at each light to calibrate your eye movement. Then they turned the lights out. Then they went in another room, and then they started pulsing water in through the microtubules into the ear against the eardrum. And they would change the temperature of the water. And as you would heat the water, it would make the fluid in the semicircular canal go one way. As you cool the water, it would go the other way. So in one ear, they put cooling water, the other ear, they'd put warm water. The effect was that you felt like you were in the dark, tumbling end over end over end, out of control. Boy. That's why they strap you to the table, because otherwise you would have been nuts.
You'd flop out.
You'd flop out. I mean, it was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. Not pleasant, but wow. And learned a lot about motion. Learned a lot about the body's reactions to it. Got to learn it all firsthand. Anyway, all's well that ends well. I spent about 6 months there, and they sent me back to A4s. Really never in my Navy experience from that point on did I ever even have a momentary bout of motion. So it was cool. So that's the turning point. That's where things start to go the other way. I went on back. One thing that happened after that, I took another cross country to the mountains. The instructor on that actually was carrier I'd mentioned, and was one of the people instrumental in helping to get me hired there. But he had family in Denver. We flew into Buckley. He drove me around Denver. He drove me up in the mountains to Evergreen. His sister lived up in Greeley. And I remember driving up there and looking at it going, man, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. I want to do this, you know. I said, I'm going to live here someday. Well, I've been living here now for 31 years. So that worked out. So that's all out of that era as well. And then come to the end. VT-21, A4s are over, carrier qualled, you know, got it all done. Weapons qualled, moving on. I mean, like life has come together. Yeah. The big threat of the motion's gone. All this is happening. And I'm like, man, here we go. And the next act begins. I get orders to A7s. Well, this is weird and I'm uncomfortable saying it, but I have to say it. Every guy instructor I'd met in the training command that had been an A7 guy had been some of the most miserable characters I'd encountered.
Really?
I really didn't think I just didn't think I wanted to be in that world. So I went to my XO and said, sir, is there any chance I could, you know, ask him to change my orders? And he goes, why would you want to do that? I go, I just don't know that this is the right fit for me. And he goes, well, we can sure call and, you know, we can call and talk to detailer. So we're sitting in his office. I'm sitting across from him at his desk and he dials up the detailer and the guy answers. That's rare.
Right.
But he answered and and he goes, can I help you? You know, and he goes, yeah, I got a student here, just got his wings. He'd like to discuss his orders. So he looks up and goes, oh yeah, we got you here. And I go, sir, I go, the only aircraft I didn't have on my dream sheet was A7s. I had every other aircraft in the inventory on my dream sheet. And he goes, yeah, so what's wrong with A7s? And I go, I don't think anything's wrong with the airplane, but I said, I've just met a lot of people down here that I'm just not sure it's a good fit for me. Well, you know the story, right? Because you know what this detailer flew.
Oh boy.
You'll go where we tell you and like it.
Yeah, so where he told me was S3s. So I got sent off to S3s. And I think he thought he was poking me, but he actually made me very happy because it was a brand new airplane. I thought the mission, I had no idea really what the mission was, but what the heck, it's somewhere else. So off to be, you know, VS-41, North Island, San Diego.
Horrible place to have to go. Horrible place.
Yeah. For a kid from Indiana, having to deal with San Diego. Yeah, it was terrible. Yeah, I lived in North Park, right by Balboa Park. I go jogging at Balboa Park. I bought a membership in the San Diego Zoo, finished my jogs, go into the zoo, go sit down in a hummingbird aviary to cool down, have 50 hummingbirds buzzing around you. And I'm going, yeah, this is a horrible place. I hate this. You know, flying, learning submarine stuff out in the Pacific. All that good stuff, you know, doing a little bombing over in the Chocolate Mountains. And you guys probably did that. I think that was a popular marine resort. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Resort. Yep.
So, yeah. So, anyway, get out to 41. Here's where life gets real. And it's going to be a sequence of things that I'm going to share now. Things I have not shared that I think probably should be shared because I think others probably have similar things in their lives. One day, I was about to take off at North Island in an S3 to go out on training flight of some kind. The squadron called us on the radio and asked us to come back to line. Get back in and shut down, and they go, tell me I need to go see the duty officer ASAP. While I was taxiing in, I noticed a black plume of smoke coming up across the bay in the city. I went in the duty officer, and the duty officer knew me, and he goes, "You live in North Park, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You need to get home." And I go, "What?" He says, "There's been a horrible accident." And he said, "I think it's near your home." And he said, "I think you should go home." And I go, "Roger that." So I go out, jump in my car, head over the bridge back into town. And as I try to get home, there are thousands of people in the streets. And I can see this smoke going up, horrible black smoke. And as I'm trying to find a way into my house. I'm driving around. I can't get in. There's too many people. I finally see a dead body in the street in front of me. And I look over, and the porch of the house, the roof was blown out. And then there's this body in the road. And I'm like, oh my God. So I park and I go, there's nothing I can do for this guy. There's people there. They're bringing a sheet out, to cover him up. I go on and hike into my house. And when I get there, there's people everywhere. Up in my yard, there's people. And the smoke's coming from just a couple of blocks away, maybe, I don't know, 200 yards as a crow flies. And there's fire trucks, emergency vehicles. What had happened that day, and you guys will recall this, I think, there was a PSI 727 coming into Lindbergh there at San Diego, and he had a midair collision with a Cessna out on a training flight. And it took them all down. The body I saw on the street was the instructor pilot in the Cessna. The scene was unlike anything you can imagine. I mean, take the craziest movies you've seen. They don't really even come close to capturing something like this. They took out about 14 houses in 2 city blocks or so over from me. Obviously, no survivors. And I'm in my house. I had a Weimaraner dog I'd moved from Kingsville with. You can imagine this dog's losing its mind, all these people and everything. I'm trying to get the dog calmed down. My wife wasn't home. And I'm just in there. It's during a Santa Ana. It's about 105, 106 degrees. Winds blowing out of the east, bringing that heat off the desert. And the smoke's being blown right into my house. I'm checking on my neighbors. Over the next several hours, we're finding body parts in our yards, on the roofs. I mean, it was just devastation. I'm at the house. I get a knock on the door. I open the door. There's a police officer standing at the door, and his chest is covered in blood. And he asked me if he can borrow my phone. And yeah, of course. So he comes in, sits down at my dining room table. I set the phone down there for him. I step into the kitchen to get him a big glass of ice water. I put the water down and I go sit down in the living room, try and, give him some space. And when I'm sitting there, he makes a call. He calls headquarters and reports. And then he, as I'm sitting there, I hear him crying. And I step around the corner and he's sobbing. He's just sobbing. And I go over, put a hand on his shoulder and what can I do? And he's just shaking his head.
Wow.
I refill his ice water. I come back. He's kind of got his composure. I go, so what's going on over there? And he goes, it's horrible. And I go, yeah, I assumed. And he goes, he says, I was the first policeman on the scene. He said, I saw it hit. I was only a couple of blocks away. He said, I came in and I saw somebody bent over a body. And I thought, oh, maybe they're survivors. And so I jumped out of the car to go help. Yeah, no. The guy that was bent over the body was not resuscitating a survivor. He was stealing the jewelry, the watch, the rings off of what was an arm and a portion of the chest. And he apparently, when he saw the policeman, swung that and hit him in the chest. That was the blood all over this man's chest.
God.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the people
Wow.
looted it. The city did everything they could, trying to kind of play that ugly aspect of this reality down. The policeman then asked me if they could set up their command post on my front porch or use it as one of their command posts. I agreed. They were there then for the next couple of weeks while they went through the rubble of the houses searching for more. Santa Ana continued. The wind continued out of the east. The stench, unforgettable. And life turned right there. At that point, I mean, even going back to my friend that was killed in the suicide, nothing really had prepared me for something like that. And I was, of course, young and dumb, and the rest of that full of, but I thought I could ignore it. I was just, so what? That's life. That's how things happen. I got to focus on flying, got to focus on doing what I do. And I did. And then, I don't know, I was pretty far along in training when this happened. And I don't remember the exact date, people can look it up, of the PSA crash. I then went back into training and was going on about my business. Well, at that time, the Navy was developing a new tanker. And they were going to, Lockheed wanted to sell the Navy the S-3 instead of as an ASW airplane, sell it to them as an in-flight refueling airplane. So that was taking place. Well, anyway, they had it out there at the RAG, and I was, in those days, training was real hit and miss. After the Vietnam War rolled down, they didn't have money. You'd train vigorously for 2, 3, 4 weeks, then you'd go into a pool for a couple of months. We called it having 5 months of training crammed into 2 years. It was really crazy. It was very hard to get competent, with that schedule and all that. So anyway, I'm in the pool, and they're trying to develop and sell the government on this tanker. And so they're going to do this thing, fly this tanker around the country to the various Marine and Navy air wings and let the guys do in-flight refueling on it. And then we'd have them fill out these forms to rate how refueling on the airplane was. So I was picked to be the co-pilot on this while I was in the pool. And so I went out and, flew this airplane. Well, we got sent, the RAG had a detachment going to the East Coast, to Oceania, to do carrier quals on the America. And was one class ahead of me. I was going to be in the next CQ class. And so I was very close to the end of training. And so they decided to send the tanker over there to take part in the CQ qual for the air wings over there and let all the guys in the air wing, hit the drogue on that thing and write up these things. So we went over there. Well, it worked out really cool because one of my best friends in the squadron, a gent that had been I think a pretty renowned college wrestler from Michigan. We'd gone through Kingsville together. Now we were out there in the RAG together. And he was going to do his first night carrier landings on the America. And it worked out to where I was going to be overhead in the tanker pattern, supporting him. And I thought, that's great. I'm going to get to see him do his first trap. This will be super. And the instructor, the guy I'm flying with, the instructor pilot's over in the other seat. I told him, I'd really like to watch my buddy catch this wire. And so we worked our, spin pattern, tanker pattern out so that we could follow him when he was coming down to the deck. And so we could see him. And what I saw was a violent explosion. Oh. And holy moly, what in the world was that? And we rolled the jet up, so we could look down trying to see what had happened. All we could see was flames. Turned out he'd landed left, drifted left, caught the wire, went over the left side, pulled the handle. By the time the seats fired, the jet had rolled toward the ship and it fired the sheets into the hull, or the seats into the hull. You know how that ended.
Oh, yeah.
Pete, this is one we probably ought to come back and pick up on next time because there's a lot more to this story.
Okay.
Because this story is going to get real involved.
Yeah. So yeah, we're running
right
short
here.
on time, and we'll probably I may
Yeah.
make this one into at least 2 episodes, but glad to have you back soon.
These
Chuck.
are great stories, Chuck. You are a great storyteller.
Fig, did I not tell you that this man
Yeah,
is a
you did.
raconteur, a world-class raconteur?
You
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And I just thought you were full of it. No,
Yeah.
I know you weren't.
Well, yeah, we are all full of it. I claim that. But what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to give you a heads up here. This story is going to turn real ugly. I mean,
It's like it hasn't already.
I got that already, Chuck.
yeah, and then there's going to be more ugly
Yeah.
to follow. There's a bunch of ugly that about happens in my life here. And where this is ultimately going to lead, and this may or may not be the purpose of your podcast, is why I'm going to tell you this. So that'll tell me how to tell this.
Okay.
In 2009, my best friend at the carrier, which I've uttered the name of there once. I know I saw you take a note, Pete, so I think you caught it. But in 2009, my best friend died. I was with him the day he got the death sentence. He was supposed to meet me the day before for lunch, and he didn't show. And I called him. He called me actually while I was in the cockpit getting ready to leave that day. And I picked the phone up and talked to him. He didn't sound very good. And I asked him, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Apparently not." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I was coming to meet you. I grabbed a granola bar on the way out of the crash pad. I choked on it when I was coming over and started coughing up blood, and went back apparently to the hooch, filled up his toilet with blood a couple of times, and called an ambulance. And the next day I came in, the chief pilot, Jack Lewis, loaned me his Jeep to run out and check on John. I got out to the hospital there, Germantown Methodist there in Memphis. And John, just as I got there, the doctors were coming in to give him the diagnosis. And I excused myself. I said, "I'll get out of here. I know you got," and John looked at me and laughed. He goes, "Ain't nothing they're going to tell me you can't hear." And I go, "You sure?" And he goes, "Absolutely. Sit down." So I got to sit there while he was given a death sentence and esophageal cancer. He was dead 7 weeks later. And I was in China, deadheading from Shanghai to Guangzhou when he died. And I learned later that day on that flight down was the next time I got sick on an airplane, but it wasn't air sickness. I was just on the flight and got some food poisoning in Shanghai, and we were in such turbulence I couldn't get out of my seat, and they had no sick sacks. So I got to yak on myself in the airplane. Went on to the hotel, cleaned up, went to bed, woke up, and I had a message to call Jack Lewis, and I called and found out John was dead. I could go on and on with stories about this guy. We worked professional standards together. He was a co-pilot of mine that I call my mentor. He was one of the most fundamentally decent humans I ever knew in my life. And former Philly police officer, went in the Navy, became a helo pilot, then transitioned to F-4s. Go figure that career path. Was Jack Lewis's commanding officer in the F-4 squadron. The reason I tell this, Pete, is following on to that, I had months of nightmares. The nightmares had smells. The nightmares had bad stuff. And I would wake up in a sweat. I became crazy emotional. I'd be watching silly movies and things would happen and the tears would start flowing. Long story short, my wife, who's a former police officer and understands things like this, realized I had a problem, got into counseling, and got diagnosed with PTSD and began my recovery. And the first part of it was I had felt extreme guilt toward John because John had asked me repeatedly to be the chairman of Pro Stan. Repeatedly, I told him, no, I've had enough union BS. I'm just going to go home to Colorado and enjoy my life. But when John died, I felt tremendous guilt that I'd let this really decent human down. So the first part of the counseling was to pay it forward for John. And I called my block rep, another old Marine, Jack Anzer, and said, "Jack," and I'd done union work in the past, so they knew I could do it. I go, "Hey, I'll give the union 2 years, no questions asked, any job you want. What I'd really like is nothing political. I just want to help out." And he goes, "Oh, great, man. That's great. Yeah, I'll look into it." So the next thing, I get a call from the chairman. and asked me again if I would step up in pro stand. And I said, absolutely. So they made me the vice chairman. And shortly thereafter is when I met Pete, because they shortly decided I should be the communications chairman. And what nobody really knew through all of my 4 years as communication chairman, my 2 years as negotiation support team coordinator, and my couple of more terms as chairman, was that all of that was in service, and that still carries me today. That's why I'm telling my story.
Well, and that's part of what this podcast is certainly all about, Chuck, that we wanted to bring people in. You know, obviously lots of funny stories, amazing stuff and all that, but there's tragic, there's poignant, and there's a lot of struggles, and a lot of people have overcome some amazing obstacles. And like you said, you know, that's part of this business. How many of us lost so many friends in so many tragic ways that if you think it doesn't scar you, oh my gosh, you know, you're definitely misinformed.
Right.
I've gotten to a place where I can talk about it.
Right.
That's taken a long time. There's things that happen out there where, you know, I wish they hadn't happened, but I'm going to get into the events and ultimately going to tie it together, because it really all goes back to that PSA crash, as I learned later. Yeah. And this accident I'm about to tell you about, and the next one, and the next one. Yeah, and you guys will relate to this, I'm pretty sure. But that's where I'm heading. So if you want to get into that, you know, and that aspect of this as we get down into the story, that's what I want to know, if that's where you want to go with this, or should I not go there?
Absolutely. We'll do that. But for today, I think I'm going to probably break this into two. I'll figure that out in post. I want to say I can't thank you enough for joining us today, Chaz.
Chuck, you're awesome.
Been a privilege. Yeah.
It actually triggered your stories triggered some memories for me too. So some other time we'll talk about that shit.
Yeah, I figured that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of this.
Well, that's the world.
Yeah, it is. It is.
We've been privileged to be part of an amazing career that's taken us through tactical aviation and at the majors. There's no other way to say it. It's a privilege and a blessing, and it's been a lot of fun. And it's been one of the biggest blessings is to meet and work with so many other solid professionals you don't seem to find elsewhere. So,
right.
In the meantime, for Fig and Chaz, I'm going to say you can reach us with any questions at Fig at sothereiwas.us or Repete at sothereiwas.us. Follow us on Facebook at sothereiwas.us/Facebook. Thanks for joining us today. Check 6.
See you.